doctor is in.
Well, the doctor is in, and not only is the doctor in, but on the newsmaker line, I have State Rep Gary Elkins calling in from the Pink Palace in Austin, and also have Amy Clark with the Republican Party of Texas. She is the vice chair. Good day to you, Gary.
Hey, good afternoon, Doc.
I appreciate you taking the time to call. Man, it's getting exciting up there in Austin now.
Yeah, well, we're actually in session right now. I walked off the floor to make this call.
Well, I don't want to keep you for too long, but I wanted to find out, first of all, excuse me, the Thursday meeting. We are in the process of possibly moving a block of wood out of the way, and I refer to none other than the Speaker of the House, Joe Strauss, because under his leadership, approximately 60% of all legislation that's gotten out and gotten a signature was led by the Democrats. And so now, thanks to Tan Parker getting off the fence, I think we're going to maybe change that on Thursday. Your thoughts, sir?
I know that a meeting's been scheduled. I don't know the details. I know what the party platform is requesting, and I guess they're just going to go through the maneuvers and the rules and explain to us what the options are.
Okay. Well, as you know, I've never kept it a secret. I think that Joe Strauss has failed Texas on multiple levels because I am one of those guys that goes to the state convention every 2 years, and I take my proposals for parts of the party platform. I had them all written out. I take that time and do it, as tens of other thousands of Texans have done, spending their time and treasure to create this wonderful thing called the Republican Party of Texas platform. And I believe that Joe Strauss has utterly ignored that, Gary Elkins.
Well, the facts are what they are. I mean, this special session has been very frustrating, no question about it.
Well, one of my listeners, when they heard you were coming on, they got their question in right away. And, of course, it's about the Second Amendment. And as you know, the number one action item on the Republican Party platform was to give Texans back their God-given rights, as outlined in Luke 22:36 in the Bible, and that is to be able to carry the weapon of our choice without a permit. And I believe that Joe Strauss has clearly stood in the way of that. Your thoughts, Gary Elkins?
That proposal hasn't even been able to pass the Senate. So that bill's got other issues besides the Speaker. I'm not going to defend the Speaker or promote him or reject him. He just, where we're at is that issue is, I know where your audience is, and they're very much in support of it. I personally support it. I've signed on those bills as co-sponsors in the past. But the issue is a lot of people, there's a lot of good people in the state just think that there needs to be a background check and some sort of mechanism, a licensing structure to carry. I know you disagree, but there's a lot of support for a licensing structure.
Well, I know that there is, and I just hope that it's not too big a moneymaker for the state of Texas that they can't get rid of that. But I want to move on to something else. This is near and dear to the hearts of all of my listeners and a lot of other Texans out there, and that is the privacy bill to protect our young girls from having to share the locker room with boys. Where do you stand on that, and where do you think it's going, Gary Elkins?
Well, I support the bill. I've signed on as a co-sponsor to all the bills that deal with that issue, and unfortunately, it's not going anywhere in the Texas House.
Now, Gary, I'm baffled by that. Can you help me to understand why this would be a problem? Help me, please.
Doc, on that issue, as my wife says, there's not any woman that wants to use a man's restroom. It's only the other way around. I don't get it. I've had people here that have tried to explain it to me. There's obviously a big group, a big constituency that's on the other side of the issue than I am, and we've talked to them. I don't understand how you can think that you're something that you're not. And it's only in the area of dealing with sexuality that we permit this kind of nonsense. You would never allow a white person to think they're a black person, or a black person to think they're a white person, or any other race or creed or whatever. You would never allow people that are obviously one way to think that they're something, and you have to respect them because they think that. As lots of constituents have told me, quite honestly, I don't care what people think. If you're a guy, you need to use the guy's restroom. If you're a gal, you need to use the gal's restroom.
That's it.
Obviously, you cannot get into people's mind and their thought processes and see what they think or what they don't think.
Well, I've often thought how awkward it must be for Bruce Jenner, who all of a sudden says, hey, I have 2 humps, therefore I'm a camel. How awkward it must be to sit down and have dinner with Bruce Jenner. It's got to be awkward, to say the least. And I don't care which side of the issue you stand on. It's weird.
Yeah, and I just don't get it. I have no way of understanding or comprehending that. So I cannot explain why the people are opposed to that, especially in the schools, which is what we're trying to do, to say that girls or guys cannot be in a locker room with girls. I just don't see what there's a problem with that. It just seems like common sense to the masses. So,
well, I always said if common sense
I don't understand it.
I always said if common sense was so common, more people would have it. I want to move on to another thing quickly. I've always believed that if you owned your land, you wouldn't have to pay anybody to live on that land. And right now, it looks to me like the state of Texas owns everything in Texas. And I would like to see some property tax removal, let alone relief. And last time I looked at it, Gary Elkins, they were having a little bit of trouble even giving us just saying, all right, we're only going to raise your taxes a maximum of 4% per year. I mean, that's a bill that says you can raise the taxes on everybody in Texas every year. And yet we can't even seem to get that little bit of relief through, Gary Elkins.
Doc, you are singing to the choir here. I have signed on that bill, and in fact, that bill was on the floor 2 days ago, or Friday, I guess. I, like a lot of other members from Harris County, voted for a amendment to roll it back to 4%, which is what you're talking about. And I got to be honest, I am just utterly amazed at the Republicans, from obviously not from Harris County, okay, but from other parts of the state, that do not support that bill. And the problem seems to be in the rural areas. There just seems to be a lot of opposition. And for the life of me, I just don't get it. And I thought that we represented the people. I did not think that we were sitting here to represent counties and represent cities and to represent other governmental entities. So I just don't get it. I don't understand.
Well,
the people are being taxed out of their home. Look, I'm one of only four. I've been here for quite a while, and I've had the opportunity to vote on lots of things in the past. Back in 1997 or 2000, and it was either 97 or 99, Talmadge Heflin, when he was state rep from Houston, offered an amendment to get rid of property tax, to get 0 property tax, and to move to a sales tax.
Yes.
I was one of only 46 people to vote for that constitutional amendment. We didn't even come close. I was talking to another member yesterday from the Houston area, and we're talking about school finance. You know, everybody knows that the school finance is the 800-pound gorilla in the, or the school tax is the 800-pound gorilla, or it makes up 60 or 70% of your property tax. And we were talking about how we could get this away from this convoluted system, because until we fix the school finance system, we're never going to fix property tax. And to me, I agree with you. To me, it is just mind-boggling that you never own your land in Texas. You never own your property. You never own your home. You only get the privilege of renting from the government. That just does not seem fair to me. And especially the system that we have in place now, where every politician especially at the local and the school level, get to hide behind the fact, well, we didn't raise your rates, we didn't raise your taxes, we didn't raise your taxes, and yet every one of your listeners that's listening to me today wrote a bigger check in 2016, or this is 2017, in January 2017, than they wrote in January 2016, and a bigger one than they wrote in 2015. And the bottom line is every one of us is writing a bigger check every year because of property tax, and it has to do with the way the reforms go, with the way the appraisals go in. At least if you're going to have a property tax, we should go do what they did in California with Prop 8 and just say, you know what, if you paid $100,000, that's the value that you're going to be taxed at until you sell your property.
Yes.
Just like stocks or anything else, there is no gain until you make a sale. So whatever you bought it for, and when people buy a home, they buy a home based upon their current situation. And so when they look at the average home in Texas is probably, I guess, about $140,000. So that probably ends up being about a $1,400 a month house note, or $1,200 to $1,400.
Mm-hmm.
That includes taxes and insurance. When people make that decision, they're making that based on, hey, I can afford, this is what I can afford.
Yes.
Well, next year they can't all of a sudden go from $1,200 to $1,400, then the next year to $1,600, then the next year to $1,800, then the next year to $2,000 because of property tax.
Exactly so. I can tell you,
it's crazy.
I've
and
seen
we're driving
too
people
many
out of their homes, and then the poor. Thank God that we do have a tax freeze when you turn 65. But how many people have been driven out of their homes when they're 65 and older because they can no longer afford to live in the property tax?
Yes.
Look, this happened to my grandmother. My grandmother bought a home in Bel Air, Texas, in 1946. Very modest neighborhood. Paid about $10,000 for the home back then. Very modest. In fact, I think she paid less than $10,000. I think it was like $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to believe now.
That used to be an affordable neighborhood in Bel Air, not anymore.
Before she passed away in 1995, lived there for about 50 years. Before she passed away, she had to get rid of her home in Bel Air because Bel Air had begun to make the transition, and they were tearing all those homes down that were built in the 1940s and building mega mansions out there.
Yep.
And now the property tax was almost more every year than she paid for her home originally. That's insanity.
Well, that's exactly what happened to a house that I still own. Now the property tax payment is larger than the original house payment. And I've seen so many widows forced out of their homes. It's just so immoral, Gary, and I don't know what it's going to take to get. Problem is, I think for the most part, there are too many young guys up there in the legislature, and they can make the payment. They have no idea what it's going to be like when they're 65.
Well, look, you've got an advocate here. I've pushed for that. I've signed on to bills. I'm on record for voting to raise your sales tax to get rid of property tax.
Yes.
I think that's the way it ought to be. I just think that I think that we need to figure out a solution for the school finance system, and then come back in and then back into it. Even if we have to tax food and other stuff to pay for schools, then we ought to do it. But we ought to have people at least live in their homes for free, and when it's paid for, it's yours.
Yes. There should be a point in time when if you never make another dime of income, at least you can live in your home until you die. And that never happens for anyone here in Texas. And a word for all you renters out there, you're paying the property tax. It's built into your rent. So if the property tax went away, your rent goes down. So keep that in mind, or at least it quits going up at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, for the average person, especially like in the area where you live in the county, the Harris County area, if you live in a mud district and you have mud taxes, the average person is paying about 3%. As a rule of thumb, you can just figure 3% a year of the value of your home. So a $200,000 home, you're paying about $6,000 a year in property taxes. $100,000, you're paying about $3,000. That's just a rule of thumb, and most people that are listening to this, if they're in the county and they're in a mud district, that's about what it's going to end up being.
Well, I would like to know what we can do to make some of this happen. I've been encouraging everyone to call the speaker to do something about this. And, of course, I am hoping that you're planning on being at that meeting on Thursday morning, Gary.
Well, I'm trying to encourage them to change the meeting to when we adjourn so that people don't have to be here Thursday, because hopefully we'll get out of here Wednesday. I'm asking Chairman Parker to change that meeting to upon adjournment so that all the maximum number of members are here. A lot of us have to get back to our real world jobs and make a living for our families. We've been tied up here for a month that we weren't planning on. But
well, we understand that you guys get a whopping $600 a month to be a rep, though the retirement plan is very good. Now, out of that $600, do you get to pay your office staff, or does the state pick up some of that tab?
The state pays the office staff.
Okay.
That's not that doesn't come out of it. But you know where I'm at right now is that it ends up costing. I have to actually write a check to serve now because the $600 a month does not even pay for the health insurance that we have to pay. So I have to write a check every year to the state just to cover my insurance.
Wow.
So,
well, at least you got some insurance. Guys like me that have been turned out of the VA hospital, we don't even have any insurance. So I suppose that's worth something.
Yeah.
Well, besides calling the speaker, do you have any other suggestions, Gary Elkins? Because I am very disappointed in this legislature.
I've been disappointed that we have not moved the governor's agenda forward. I've made my voice known. I mean, I've made my concerns known that, hey, this is problematic for a lot of members. A lot of members like me, we need to vote on these issues. They're not controversial in our areas. They're not controversial in our district. I mean, how can anybody be against rolling back your taxes or having an election if they go more than 4%? How can anybody look? I get it, but in Houston there was a vote. In Harris County there was a vote on the bathroom bill.
Yes.
58% of Harris County residents voted for that. I think that we should have made it a constitutional amendment and given the people of Texas the right to vote, because it would pass overwhelmingly across the state.
It indeed would.
But people know there's a difference between men and women. People just inherently know that. And as much as some people want to think that there's not, there is. And as my grandmother used to always tell me, she would say, you know, whenever you put men and women together, you're just going to have problems.
Oh, man. We should have put her in charge of the military.
Yeah, just so. She just knew, just inherently, just that older generation just knew. They'd had the life experience. They just observed things through history. And look, we all know it's true.
We do know it's true, but we try to ignore it.
Honestly, I have no reference. I cannot get my head around what they're trying to argue for, Doc. I'm sorry. I tried. I just can't get it.
Don't be sorry. Just stand up there and scream in the well. That'll help. And I'm encouraging everyone to call 512-463-1000. That is the number for the Speaker of the House, 512-463-1000. And just tell old Joe that you're a little disappointed in his recalcitrance on these very important issues. The Senate got in there and passed 19 items in a week. And the House now is in week 3, I believe, and we got, 4 or 5 of them out of there?
Yes, maybe 6.
So not good enough, and I personally am not happy. So Gary Elkins, you've been there for a while. Are you planning on running again?
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. He's announced here early. Gary Elkins is going to run again. And so I appreciate you going up there and doing what you can for these guys. And I just want to see more of the Republican Party platform considered in the future. I really wish that Republicans would lean heavy on that platform.
I tell you, Doc, I'm like a lot of your constituents. I'm very frustrated. We've got a president that's trying to make America great again, and the Senate in Washington is just not cooperating, and for that matter, the House. It's at every level of government. And I used to think that it meant something to be a Republican. I thought a Republican was for smaller government and for lower taxes, and yet in Washington, it seems that the only time that the Republicans are for smaller government is when they're not in the power, when they're the opposition party or the minority party and they can't do anything. And when they have a chance to do something, they don't. So I understand the frustration. And look, this is the frustration going on right now in Austin. We got a 95-member majority, and we've got a redistricting case coming up. We're probably going to lose 6 to 8 seats next time, which is going to make it even going to make it harder to implement some of the conservative agenda that the Republicans have. But you know, when you put your name as a Republican or a Democrat, hopefully you run because you believe in what the party and the apparatus of the party and the system that you're running for is electing you for. When Democrats know that I'm a Republican, they know what I stand for. At least they should.
Well, they should.
Right?
But we got too many.
They know that when I come here, that we're going to have differences of opinions on certain issues. Hopefully, there's a lot of things that Republicans and Democrats can agree on, but there's a lot of things we don't agree on. And the things that we don't agree on, we just fundamentally don't agree. We can't even get close. We're just opposites.
Well, there are too many Democrats
in the pro-life issues.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, I'm pro-life. I'm for smaller government. I'm for less regulation. I want lower taxes. I want to get rid of the property tax and go to a consumption tax. These are things that Republicans, you know, at least used to believe in. But apparently, I can't figure out the lines are so blurred now. I don't know what Republicans stand for.
Well, I think it's because we have too many Democrats in the Republican Party. That's how it looks to me, Gary Elkins.
Well, I would not disagree with you because it sure seems like there's a lot of moderate Republicans that
they'd be happier in the other party.
That seem to look. All you got to have is 20 to 21 moderate Republicans and 55 Democrats, and you can't get anything done. And I think that's where we're at.
Well, sadly so. Gary Elkins, thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. I do appreciate it. I've got the Republican Party of Texas Vice Chair Amy Clark on the other line, and I gotta hit this break here before I go to her. But go back in there and make us proud, Gary Elkins.
All right, thanks, Doc. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
God bless your audience.
Be right back on the Doc Greene Show with Amy Clark.
You just defended yourself with a gun. The police are called and you're potentially involved in a homicide, but it was self-defense. At this point, you are not in your right mind. No one ever is when they are in fear for their life and defend themselves. Anything you say can and will be used in a court of law, both civilly and criminally. Fortunately, you have selfdefensefund.com. We are the National Association for Legal Gun Defense, and we protect our members nationally in all 50 states, up to $1 million per incident per member. Let us do the talking for you and visit selfdefensefund.com. Any weapon, any state, anytime.
Run away. Seems so very fun, never home.